Well, Bob Meeks, I guess Vance leaves you the tough issues, and today they don't get any tougher. The Middle East, our topic on Face to Face.
Well, we will let Vance take care of the Mets and the Yankees, which I'm sure he's eager to do. And stay tuned, we'll be right back to do Middle East Peace. Is it possible?
Production of Face to Face is brought to you by TCF Bank, your hometown bank with convenient full-service banking offices and express teller ATMs located throughout the Twin Cities and all of Minnesota. TCF Bank, member FDIC. The Target Corporation family of companies, including Dayton's, Mervyn's, California, and Target, is proud to give over $1 million a week back to the community. And the law firm of Lockridge, Grindle, Noun, providing legislative and legal advice with offices in Minneapolis and Washington, D.C.
Welcome back to Face. I'm Jason Lewis, along with co-host this week, Bob Meeks, in for Vance Opperman. As you know, there's been trouble in the Mideast, and while we take a little break from the campaign trail, this will definitely have an impact on the new administration, whoever heads it. The Middle East has been a problem for many, many years. The Oslo Accords in 1993, the Y agreements, even going back to Camp David in 78. They all seem to have failed to bring peace to that troubled region. So today on Face to Face, we're going to take our own look and see if we can't come to some agreements. Our guests, two distinguished Americans, Ahmad Tharwat, he is an Egyptian-born American, and Amit Sella, he is an Israeli-born American. They join us today to talk about this troubled region. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me start with some history. If, in fact, we base this whole problem on the premise that people have historical claims to lands going back thousands and thousands of years, how can the world function that way? Now, the Arab community says since the 7th century, we have controlled the area known as Palestine. Israelis say, no, you go back to 3,000 years ago, and this was the kingdom of David and Solomon. It's our claim. Is that really a good way to settle these disputes?
I don't think it's a good way. It never was, and I think we can even help and find out, define a problem happened 3 weeks ago, let alone 7,000 years ago. I think once you get God and the religious aspect into the conflict, it complicated more than it really is, and I think we should get God out of the real estate business and we'll get into the business. There is two people, one land, and they should just sit down together and try to figure out to live together in peace.
But how long have the Palestinians claimed the area now known as Palestine, including the West Bank, Gaza Strip, has their own? My understanding is that's a relatively recent phenomenon.
Well, started in the 40s when nationalism has really taken off during this time. But I think the
establishment of Israel in 48.
Sorry, they really exaggerated the idea, and I think the Palestinians been the people who live there, they've been always living there. I mean, of course, it goes through a moment when the Jew were there, and then the Christian were there, and then the Muslim were there. I mean, the whole idea of who were there first is really the only people were there first, and just descent and people get born and convert to other religion, and that's what caused all the problem. And if you're going to look at the Jew as a race, not as a religion of the people who live there, now you still have another problem, dimension in the problem. But if the Palestinians, as an Arab or a Muslim or Christians, they came from a descent, people who were there. But to call them Palestinian, to call them something else, that was, that's just a definition.
It's human fiction.
Yeah, that was just a definition. But I think the people who claim the land, they may be have different religion, different background, but they should be the same people.
Final question for you before Bob takes over here, and that is, it seems to me that the Palestinians have a public relations problem in that they're claiming that, look, the West Bank is properly ours, the Gaza Strip is properly ours, these are Palestinian lands, but yet their own neighbors, other Arab nations, will not accept the Palestinians. That's why they're refugees. Why isn't the Palestinian homeland, as you've heard many times before, in Jordan?
Well, the thing is, you don't just go and live in some land because people accept you. I mean, as people, they claim their statehood and they want to have independence, they want to have their own country like anybody else. And the fact that there is 28 different Arab countries and they have a lot of lands, that does legitimize the fact that they have they lose their rights to claim their own state and their own country like any other nation that we see, that they have to claim their own. Yes, it's like we're telling when you have a conflict between two countries, why don't you just move? The same argument can be said, why can't the Israelis or the Jewish state in Europe or American, why can't they? And then you have you really it's a counterproductive in dealing with the issue, because if you're using the same logic to the Palestinian, why can't you use it to the
well, what we
Israelis?
do in many ways is called the melting pot
Yeah,
here in
yes,
America.
exactly.
Amit, cutting to the chase, what solution is there that accommodates some of these concerns that Ahmad has voiced?
Well, Ahmad, first of all, brought up a very important point. I think that there must be a dialogue between the two people. It will be the best for the two people and the region itself to become one and to have a peace and live in harmony. However, I would like to bring some of the history behind it to point that the complexity of the problem. And one of them is, as you have mentioned, that the Palestinian used to live, first of all, not under the Palestinian names. The Palestinian names came from the word Philistine. The Palestinian lived as Arabs under the Egyptians in the Gaza Strip, and there was never any opportunity was given to him by the Egyptian to have a country there. At that time, they lived in Jordan. They were chased by King Hussein in Jordan, from Jordan, because they had too much power and they start to rock his administration and they become a threat to him. From then, they were pushed to Syria, and they were used by Syria as a tool, a political tool and a militant tool to attack Israel. From then, they went to Lebanon. And in Lebanon, they faced the same problem as I mentioned before, from the Egyptians to the Jordanians to the Syrians. They had tremendous amount of problems, and from Lebanon, they left to Tunisia. One of the biggest travesties that occurred to the Palestinians as people did not come from Israel. It came from their own brothers, Arabs, that never, to date, find a solution for them. Even to the summit that we just seen right now in Cairo, there was no solution for the Palestinian issues. It was brought up upon Israel to solve the problem.
But the greater problem for Israel, though, is that here is this unsettled refugee group of refugees, and what accommodation can Israel do? Can it stop the settlements, its own trying to put people into the West Bank? What kind of things can Israel do?
Well, Israel have done many things in the past, and I'm sure that Israel will do many things in the future. And as my gentleman that sits next to me can testify, or for the name of peace, Israel have given the Egyptian the entire Sinai Desert. It was one of the best area with the most resources that Israel have had. It was proven that Israel is willing
Egyptian,
to... Well,
Please.
please.
Let me just interrupt you for a second.
And
we're going to take a break,
Go ahead.
and when we come back, we will get to that question of what each side might be able to give the other in order to get the parties back at the table. Bill Clinton can't do the whole thing. I think some people in the Mideast have to do it.
Yeah. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. it to me. Oh,
Welcome back on Face to Face. We're looking at the Mideast today and how peace might be found in that very troubled region. We have two superb guests with us that represent the more Israeli and the more Palestinian points of view. Let me ask this question. It's a little unfair, but we've heard the arguments, if you're a voter just in the U.S., we've heard these arguments about who's going to settle, who's going to come to the talks, etc. Why should a American voter care? Why should we care more about peace in the Mideast than the next conflict in East Timor or another region of the world? Why are we so focused on this? And do you get that question?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I think that, first of all, the Middle East can be a threat for the entire world if there will not be a peace there. I think that there is a lot of extremist movements right now in the Middle East, and it might even topple some of the moderate Arab countries. I think that both sides should bring the moderate people together so we don't have this kind of a conflict. We have a conflict with, as we saw with Saddam, and we have the conflict that we saw in the entire region, and I think that it is imperative to the United States to be involved in the process and assist all of the parties to solve their differences so we can have a peace there.
Ahmad, I want to get your reaction to that and your comments on the Egypt question with regard to the Sinai.
Oh, I think the whole argument that we give to Egyptian Sinai and we give to the Palestinian West Bank and Gaza, it's the same argument. A shoplifter is negotiating stolen goods. That's how the Palestinians look at it, and that's how the Egyptians look at it. I think it's very counterproductive if we're going to discuss who were there first in the historical element of this. The main issue here now that those two people are facing a survival problem. The Israelis should realize that the Palestinians under a military occupation more than 50 years is longer than any nation that we know.
Well, not the occupied territories now. I mean, you go back to the 1967 conflict, Israel did not instigate that. They finished it. And that's why they're called the occupied territories. Why should Israel, if somebody declares war on Israel and they take over land, where's the imperative for them to return it?
I don't know who instigate this problem. I think we can have another half an hour to discuss something 67. The main issue is Israel is the third or the fourth biggest military power in the world. I think the Palestinian story hasn't been told, and the human tragedy of the Palestinian story hasn't been told to the American people. The same way I'm not comparing the atrocity that the Jewish went through in Europe. That wasn't the doing of the Arabs, and the fact is that they are there. The reality is that two people, one land, they should live together, and the question should be, how we're gonna solve it.
Quickly turn that on Amit here, and that is he does have a point. I mean, whether you go back 3,000 years or just to the 7th century, Palestinians have been there, and their point is, look, how would you feel if the British got together with the Americans at the turn of the century and said, we're going to declare the Balfour Declaration that there's a homeland, and then in 1948 we just establish a homeland there. Now, naturally, since that moment, the tensions have been there. They've been escalated through these conflicts, but doesn't that fundamental issue of a creation by other powers of a homeland in the Middle East for a peoples, isn't that in many ways the crux of the matter?
Yes, and I'd like to answer it very simply. 99.9, and I'm reading right now, quote unquote, from an Arab journalist by the name of Farah. 99.9% of the Middle East land owned by Arabs. 1/10 of 1% of the land is owned by Israel. The most decorated general in Israel have become, in my opinion, thank God, to be a prime minister. Very bright person that met with President Clinton and Arafat and have strive to have a peace with the Palestinians like no other prime minister in Israel. He was even willing to give part of Jerusalem. He was willing to give the majority of part of the West Bank, and I would like
In the Gaza Strip?
and the Gaza Strip. Israel is the only country today in the world, and that everybody should really understand that have today 10 seats in its parliaments that are represented by Arab Palestinians in a full democracy.
And what about that
Israel-
land for peace? They've given back land for peace. 99% of the West
And
Bank.
that's the whole tragedy in the whole thing. I mean, I think the both parties are focusing on the conflict on than what they agreed on. I mean, they have 95% agreements of area, and they having difficulty managing their agreement than managing conflict. And I think they should focus on what they agreed on, and I think they should let Jerusalem out of, it's a very emotional issue, should let Jerusalem away from the conflict for now until the people are
But may I
prepared
finish my
for it.
point 1 second, please?
Please.
Okay. We should not also neglect that all of the electricity that is being given today to the West Bank are supplied by Israel. All of the roads are supplied by Israel. There are taxes that are paid by Israeli government to the Palestinians. And all of the infrastructure that was built in the West Bank from 1967 to date were done by Israel and with the help of Israel. Also, please, the Palestinians have a tremendous anemic economy. And there was some suggestion that Israel should separate completely from Palestine and build a Palestinian state. However, the majority of the Palestinians today that are shooting at an Israeli soldiers,
Oh.
please, just a second, working today in Israel, and Israel support their economy.
Let me interrupt just for a question here. Can either Arafat on one side or Barak on the other, back in July, they were negotiating, they were getting in this long step-by-step process to what's going to happen in Jerusalem, and at least some of the reports said they might have reached agreement, but they both knew they would be dead in a week, that they could not really be representing their own constituencies. Is that
the
have
peace
some
process,
truth to it?
the peace process started in '93, and I think the Palestinians waited for 8 years, and there was nothing delivered for them. They still under a military occupation. There is substandard living standard. The people are really no education. And when you're talking about, yes, the Israeli provide instruction, all the things, because they are not allowed to own their own instruction, and they are under military occupation. So I think when you take, the freedom, dignity, and from the people, all they have is just a symbolic things, throwing rocks at Occupy. I mean, I think we're making a big issue out of the violence and the Palestinian street. And here we're talking about Palestinians shooting an Israeli citizen. That really tells you how the distortion of the whole picture of how the Palestinian story hasn't really been told in fully to the American people.
Ahmad Thawat, you get the last word. Thank you, sir. And Amit Sella, thank you. Very informative discussion, gentlemen. Bob and I will be back to face off right after this.
We'd like to hear your thoughts about the show. Comments may be directed to comments@facetofacetv.com or send a letter to Face to Face, 801 Nicolette Mall, Suite 1860, Minneapolis, Minnesota, 55402.
Listen to me. Wow, it ain't nothing but a heartbreak. Wow, friend only to the undertaker. Oh, war is an enemy to all things. The thought of war blows my mind. War has caused unrest within the younger generation. Induction, then destruction. Who wants to die? Oh, war! Good God, y'all!
Well, Bob, that gives us just a glimpse on how intractable some of these problems are. Two distinguished Americans, very cordial. That was nice to see.
Very reasonable.
Too bad they're not negotiating, but it was a fascinating discussion. Now on to the more parochial issues. And of course, when you go from the Middle East war and peace, you want to come up to an issue that's equally as important: ramp meters. They went off, and look what's happened.
For me, it's great. And I hear a few people objecting. I want to try to throw one larger thought in the discussion. Some marketing people looked at consumers and what they wanted out of a car. And the consumers told them that they see the world of the roadway as a Mad Max, anything goes, any mile per hour, any lane.
Bob, as usual, you've been hanging around Opperman too long. The fact is, the ramp meters, I'm glad they're off. You know what they've been doing for years and years? They've been disguising our lack of road building in this state, especially the metropolitan area. They have been disguising and deflecting the real issue. I think that in many areas, in certain roadblocks, things are actually worse with the meters off. Because now we see the bottlenecks for what they are. People aren't stacked up on the ramp, they're on the freeway stuck in traffic.
Well, I agree with you, and I think this is going to be great news for Ted Mondale and the next
No,
future.
they're only going to build 23 more lane miles in the next 20 years.
Oh, no, he's going to put more light rail out to all the dales.
Light rail's going to solve the ramp
Yes,
meter
yeah,
problem and
there
our
we go.
congestion problem.
Yep.
All right, how about this? Since the shame Vance isn't here because I could embarrass him much easier than I could you on this next issue. I seem to recall for the last 5 years, Mr. Opperman is saying, it's the Clinton-Gore economy. It's Clinton-Gore this. All the successes are Clinton-Gore. Well, now Al Gore is running for president, and guess who he doesn't want to have campaign with him? Bill Clinton.
To me, it's no surprise the Democrats want the only Democratic winner of our recent history to be out on the campaign trail. I mean, before Bill Clinton, people said maybe there never would be a Democrat elected president again. Al Gore, fortunately, says, no, I think I'd like to handle this myself.
Do you think that's right? Do you think?
Well, I can't tell other than that the tracking polls showed that he actually went ahead of Bush during this period where he said, no, keep
Well, it
Clinton
depends on
the
which
sidelines.
poll. I mean, you use polls are all over the place right now. It's going to be a tight race. But the Boston Globe did report an anonymous Democratic aide, I think, to the Gore campaign said, look, if it weren't for Bill Clinton, we'd be up 20 points. Now, I don't believe that. But clearly there's a problem here. And here you have the vice president who on the day of the impeachment said Bill Clinton would go down as one of the greatest presidents in history. Well, if he's so great, Mr. Gore, have him campaign with you.
I think all that Al Gore needs from Bill Clinton is the record. He doesn't need the personal issues. And with the economic record, that's what he's contrasting with Bush, and so far so good. I
So
mean,
the Democrats have been lying all along about Bill Clinton being really the scoundrel. That was all a Republican mythology. He really is a great guy, but people believe the mythology? Is that why they don't want him out there?
No, I think it's the same thing. I mean, go back to the election everyone compares this to, 1960. Eisenhower stayed on the sidelines because Nixon wanted to be his own president. He wanted to win it on his own. I think that's what Al Gore is up to.
I remember Dwight Eisenhower. I've read about Dwight Eisenhower, and Bill Clinton is no Dwight Eisenhower. I can guarantee that. Speaking of polls, Bob, the last poll taken here in Minnesota, I think it was Star Tribune poll, showed George W. Bush Republican ahead of Al Gore. Now, we haven't voted Republican for a president since, Nixon in 72?
1972.
Here in Minnesota? What's going on?
I think the state is that competitive. I think Jesse Ventura and Norm Coleman proved that other people than a Democrat get 72% of the vote when they run in a general election. That was 1998.
Skip finishes third, right?
This is not a take it for granted Democratic state. Those are.
That's been the history, though. At least that's been the conventional wisdom.
Well, it's always helped because we've had Minnesotans who are
Right.
Democrats on
On the national scene.
on the ballot. I remember doing the Mondale campaign 1984. I mean, he barely, I think it was by about 5,000 votes, carried his own state against Reagan. There's no reason to think, however, that if the Nader people come home, that George Bush can win Minnesota. If the Nader voters, that 8% in the polls, if they stay with their protest vote for Ralph Nader.
Am I hearing you right? That Minnesota's a center-right state?
I think it's a centrist state. I think
It'll be fascinating. Tennessee's up for grabs, Minnesota's up for grabs, Arkansas is up for grabs. These are all states that should be going to the Democrats this year.
And yet the whole electoral mix looks about tied.
Yeah, it really is going to be, he's going to be 1960 all over again. Bob Meeks, great job. Thanks for your help this program.
Thank you, Jason.
Join us again next week when Vance and I will be back for another edition of Face to Face.
Transportation services are provided by Northwest Airlines. Some people just know how to fly. Production of Face to Face is brought to you by TCF Bank, your hometown bank with convenient full-service banking offices and express teller ATMs, located throughout the Twin Cities and all of Minnesota. TCF Bank, member FDIC. The Target Corporation family of companies, including Dayton's, Mervyn's, California, and Target, is proud to give over $1 million a week back to the community. And the law firm of Lockridge, Grindle, Noun, providing legislative and legal advice with offices in Minneapolis and Washington, D.C. Additional support is provided by AbleCon and Greg D. Shoquist. Internet service is provided by eStrategy.com.
Bob Meek will take a little break from the campaign trail, but not really. The next president's going to have to deal with the Middle East, and right now the peace process is in a shambles.
I think we have two guests that can really shed some light on this. One served in the Israeli military, the other served in the Egyptian military. Please join us on the next Face to Face.
Bob Meeks, the Middle East peace process is in a shambles. Israel has now ended negotiations with the Palestinians. Doesn't look good.
For once, Jason, I think we're in agreement. Our guests, however, will be heated in their argument. Please join us Sunday at 11 for Face to Face.
I'll tell you what's been a problem in the Middle East peace process is Bill Clinton trying to get a last-minute agreement for his own legacy. That was almost irresponsible, Bob Meek.
Well, I think it had a little bit to do with the deadline that was set by Arafat for announcing the Palestinian state more than Clinton's needs. But that'll be our discussion next on Face to Face.